Hi, my name is Lenore Von Stein, and this is another episode of The Facts. This is a discussion episode. The Facts is usually is music, some of you who tune in, but we are also integrating episodes of discussion for my brain and your brain, you know, for get these people talking, other people talking about stuff. And tonight we're going to continue talking about education. And with me tonight is Bill Crane, who's at City College, and he's a professor of psychology and works in child development. And we have Lois Weiner. She's at New Jersey City University in elementary and professor of elementary and secondary education. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And we have Alan Fagenberg, whose name I mispronounce all the time. He's at City College, and he's in architecture and education. And we've been sitting here for a while talking. And these guys have been talking about a lot of different things, but I'd like to talk tonight about tests and teachers, attitudes towards teachers, what we call the deprofessionalizing of teachers. What is a profession? Any profession? What do you think a profession is?
Well, I'd rather talk about teaching as a profession, because that's really the area of my expertise. And I think that when we talk about teaching as a profession, we're talking about an occupation that has a moral mooring, an occupation that requires mastery of skills and knowledge, and an occupation that is driven by a desire to improve the society. So when we talk about the deprofessionalizing of teaching as an occupation, I think that we're really talking about an attack on all of those things, on all of those aspects of the occupation. The moral grounding of teaching, I think, is being attacked. The skills and the knowledge, the mastery of a wide range of teaching skills and strategies, knowledge of child development, and understanding of the role of schools in a democracy. I think all of those are being undercut by the reforms that are being imposed on kids and teachers.
I want to. Why is it so easy to do that in this society? It's very easy to attack those morals, and I do agree with you. The acquiring of skills and knowledge, and it's a piece of cake, it seems, to knock them around. And people have seem to have such mixed feelings about teachers, and that's easily played on. I'm just curious. Anybody have anything to say about that?
I would add one thing, because I agree with you. I think the other thing that's necessary in teaching and educating is a passion. Mm-hmm. And I think the passion is to work with younger people and to incorporate in them a quest for questioning and for challenging. And I agree with you. I mean, the kind of the epitome of this is the online courses, where now we can even get rid of teachers. Mm-hmm. We can do a tape, and we can do a course, and it doesn't matter whether we have a seminar room with 8 students, or we could show it nationally to 4 million people. And the idea that this undermines what we're trying to do, that anybody can do this. You put it on tape and it can be done. And I think that one of the things, you know, you mentioned and we see also is these attacks now. It's happening everywhere, but especially in New York, with what's the problem with education? That first problem is teachers. Why? Because they're unionized. And we can't get rid of them. And you have lousy people, and we can't get rid of them. And that this is, rather than looking at the basis of education and learning and this narrower realm we're getting into, it's kind of easy to point the blame and avoid the discussion.
Right. One of the things about a professional is that the society trusts the judgment of that person. There's some basis for the judgment. And the teacher, traditionally as a professional, would make judgments about a child. The teacher's observations, intuitions, and so on made a big difference. That this child seems sensitive. I'm going to have to be more sensitive to this child. This child is passionate about this, so I'm going to sports, so I'm going to go with that. I think, or the ability to innovate new things. So like a doctor, you expect they will, you know, you have to trust the doctor's judgment. And Judgment about the qualities and individuality of a child, and when to back off, when to get tougher on the child. All these things are they go into more the artistic side, and they're not very quantifiable. So that to make something teacher-proof is to have a rigid system and have tests which are simply quantifiable. Right now, the teacher's judgment means nothing. They don't even, the teachers. The one line Debbie Meyer said is that the teachers have to wait till the test scores come in to know how the child is reading. Well, they don't. They know how well a child's reading in great detail, much more than a test will tell them. But with the test, that deprofessionalizes the profession in that way, the teacher in that way. And I think part of the reason, Lenore, is that this emphasis on whatever is quantifiable in our society, so judgment is that it's qualitative, gets subverted. The other thing you were mentioning as we were talking is about historically the teachers with it was an opening for immigrants and women, and mostly women went into it, and it was easy. And you mentioned the gender, and these issues made it easy and they had to fight to get some status. Is that something we were talking about? And so it's easier to take a profession that basically started off with very low salaries, was assigned to women primarily. The school marm was the model. It's easier to undermine it. But maybe that's a different issue than the.
Well, I think that in order to understand the viciousness of this attack, I mean, because the attack is really like. I teach in New Jersey, and Governor Christie's attacks they're personally vicious. There's a malice, that's evident in his in anti-teacher statements. That sort of global anti-teacher sentiment. That's, I think, quite fascinating from a psychological point of view about what's animating this personal viciousness towards teachers. And I think that one aspect that has not been discussed is the fact that teaching is women's work. And 85% of the people who teach in K-12 are women. And women are the target. And I don't think that this is really any different from, in one respect, from the attack on welfare and welfare mothers. That it is an attack on nurturing. And it is an attack on the nurturing functions of a society. And it's part of this whole ethos that the only thing that counts is making money, which is, of course, very easy to quantify.
Right.
How do you quantify the love and the nurturing that a parent or a teacher or a nurse or a doctor provides? Well, that's hard to do, but what you can do is you can count the money. You can count the dollars. So I think that we need to understand this cultural shift in the society. And one of the holes in, I think, research that's been analyzing this attack on teachers and teaching and teachers' unions is this element of gender. And I think that we really cannot understand the ferocity of the attack or the buy-in without unpacking some of the aspects of gender. I want to say one other thing as well. I don't think that we can look at the picture in this country and generalize from this country to what's happened in the rest of the world. And the research that I've been doing in the last several years has been about the global context, because these attacks on teachers are global.
They are.
They're absolutely global. The project began actually under Pinochet.
That's right, that's right.
Began under Pinochet, and I was just talking to a researcher whose work is on Chile, and she told me that they've uncovered in the archives the fact that the day after Allende fell, they closed down all the schools of teacher education. They had the project all mapped out. They understood that to transform the society, they had to destroy the real existing institutions of teacher education and public education. So It began with Pinochet. It then goes to the rest of Latin America, of course with the support of the U.S. and the World Bank. It's imposed on Africa and Asia as the price, as part of the restructuring of their economies. In other words, you want money to build new roads, you want money to build a dam, well, you have to alter your school system. You have to use standardized tests. You have to charge fees. You have to limit access to higher education. It spreads to Western Europe with Thatcher. The rest of it goes to Eastern Europe, and then it comes back to the United States in the form of No Child Left Behind in the Bush administration. So, but when you look elsewhere in the world, you see tremendous resistance on the part of teachers. Tremendous. And I hope that people will look at this website that is maintained by the co-editor of this book I had a part in putting out a few years ago, The Global Assault on Teaching Teachers and Their Unions. The website is www.teachersolidarity.com.
You know, there's one little angle that has fascinated me about this, is that in traditional culture, the teacher, to be a teacher is like the wisest, it's the most noble thing you can. You can be. And you see it in African American communities too. When somebody is making some points and giving a speech or something, the audience will shout out, "Teach, teach!" Like it's revered. It's something, maybe an attack on the intellect. You know, the suspicion of the intellectuals or the people. Because there is.
Yes, it is. And it is an ideological, it's not just an economic, but it's an ideological. They don't want people to think
critically.
And they don't want people, and you know, when I talk about this, people will say, oh, you know, you're saying it sounds like it's a conspiracy. Well, conspiracy is very secret. And this isn't secret. I mean, this is not secret. You need only to look at the World Bank documents that describe this project that call teachers the greatest threat to global prosperity, teachers and their unions.
Oh my God.
World Development Report, 2002.
So it could be
it's laid out there. It's just laid out there. When Rod Page said the NEA is a terrorist organization, I don't know if you remember that.
Yes.
People laughed. They said, oh, what was he smoking? Well, it's not that he was smoking something. He was inhaling the atmosphere and the ideas
very interesting.
of the World Bank and Wolfowitz and Paul Wolfowitz. I mean, these ideas have been just have permeated the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund for 2 decades, and we in the United States have just now, it's like it's ricocheted back to us, and we are now just experiencing it. So we should not assume that the abject surrender of the U.S. teachers' unions characterizes the response in the rest of the world.
And one of the things that I just wanted to throw this in, because after I said it, I realized that I hadn't said enough. Just when I said the attitudes towards teachers, that such easy marks, and aside from traditional gender issues and nurturing issues, I think that part of the reason how I gleaned that attitude is off the mainstream corporate press, which is giving me the feedback on what's what, I don't, and everybody else, so I just wanted to throw that in, that my perceptions are colored by people who have an agenda.
Well, it's a propaganda machine, and we really have to acknowledge that this is an extremely well orchestrated, magnificently funded propaganda campaign to make us think that we have no alternative except standardized testing, loss of public ownership of public schools, which is in New York City characterized by mayoral control.
Yeah.
Creation of charter schools, privatization of public education, all aspects of public education, have been privatized, and the destruction of teachers' unions. And we need to understand that the reason that, and they're quite explicit, the reason when you look at at our opponents' literature, to use that word, I'm sorry, but when you look at what they write, they are quite explicit that you have to do away with teachers' unions because they are the greatest impediment to carrying out this project. They intend to privatize, corporatize, destroy public ownership. That's the project.
I think it goes, again, I'm in agreement. I think there are all kinds of levels where this also reflects. I mean, this big campaign of Teach for America. So it deprofessionalizes teaching because, oh, we can take anybody and send them into a school to teach. And if they only do it for 2 years, well, that's okay, we'll get some more. And the attack on the neighborhoods, I mean, Paulo Freire, when he first became the director of education, he was thrown in jail because he was teaching the peasants to read and write. And it was seen as subversive because if you get people to think, they're going to question everything that's around them. And I think the other aspect of this is that the need where we're having major economic and social problems around the world, but in this country, and who do you find as scapegoats? So you don't pick on Wall Street or the CEOs that are making the biggest bonuses ever in history. So you pick off the more vulnerable. Well, why are we having problems? Well, our kids are poorly educated. Well, right? And if you start looking, and they'll show all the statistics, the schools in the United States are slipping further and further down the list on any international standards. And instead of looking at this, what do they want to do? They want to get rid of the unions. They want to standardize. They want longer. Schools aren't good, so we'll give even more time in schools. Standardized testing isn't working, so we'll give even more standardized testing. And I think that whole thing is falling into propaganda it is, but it's an easy out to get people's disillusionment and to help channel it into what I think is the wrong way of going.
Well, I think we need to understand that when Obama appointed Geithner, he was actually also choosing his education policy. Of course. Because what he was saying is, I am not going to go after the banks. I am not going to do anything big in terms of job creation. I'm not going to do anything about structural unemployment. The economy, we're going to have what we have now, the so-called jobless recovery, right? And what we're going to focus on is education, and we're going to pretend that education can drive economic reform. And I think that those of us who care about education have to say, education cannot drive economic reform. It doesn't matter how much money you put into education. Education cannot be a substitute for a jobs policy that puts people back to work. And we have to say that education can democratize access to the existing jobs. But we can't create jobs. It's the government's responsibility to create jobs.
So they blame their own economic failures, like producing cars that fell apart, on the educational system.
Yeah.
When, in just the automotive industry, in the 70s, we started to lose out to the Japanese and the Germans in the automotive industry, where the policy was to create cars that fell apart in 4 or 5 years. So naturally, and big, huge cars, but to blame those decisions on the schools is an outrage. Some people, listeners or viewers, may be wondering, well, what about those test scores? Aren't we in fact behind other nations? And that's is something. My view on that is that I always thought kind of that the United States had a better approach in that we kind of let students go along a little more slowly, and then our higher education, our colleges were the envy of the world, and they still are the envy of the world because we let kids develop a little more slowly, have some time for play and leisure, and then when they get to colleges, they start to blossom. That was then, but right now you got the thing where we're jamming academics much too early into the childhood, and we're driving, using tests to drive the educational system.
I don't disagree, but I think it's a mixed bag, and I don't think it's that simple because you know, we teach at City College, so we have students from all over the world. And I just had this discussion in one of the classes, and the foreign-born students, the less time they've been in the United States, the more adamant they are of what a terrible education they're getting here.
In the college?
In the college, and those that went to high school also. Why? Because they're saying what they were exposed to in school in their countries, they were treated with so much more respect in terms of their intellect and their understanding. And they come and they find that they go to college and they're taking courses that they probably had when they were already in the equivalency of 8th or 9th grade. They also find, which I find really interesting, is that they don't think that the American students, their colleagues, know how to think critically. They're simply going after what's the right answer on the test.
Why are they all coming here then?
Well, it depends where they're coming from, because some of them have been or at least their parents believe the myth of the streets paved with gold. And they come here for better opportunity.
Don't they come for colleges too?
But
in some respect, but then they're disillusioned because they see the reality.
I'm going to cast this whole issue of the international comparison of the test scores in a different way. You know, because the test scores themselves are really contested about what they mean, who takes the tests.
Yeah, that's
what's
another
a
issue.
12th grader in China versus
Yeah.
what's a 12th grader here. You know, who are we selecting to take the test? There are all kinds of issues like that you know, that to me just throw the credibility of all these international comparisons. It challenges the credibility of all these international comparisons from the evidence that I've seen. When you pick up educational research journals, you see that the credibility of these international comparisons is constantly challenged by researchers. So I'm going to recast it, and what I want to talk about is the fact that our economy is producing jobs that require only a 7th or 8th grade education. Jean Anions has done this great research, you know, from the Grad Center about just using Department of Labor statistics that shows that the overwhelming majority of jobs that are being created in our economy now are for places like Walmart. Now, given that, the competition is for the 10% or 15% of jobs that are going to pay well and require critical thinking, and everybody else is going to be competing for jobs at Walmart or Mickey D's or Chipotle Grill, so or Rite Aid. So when you're competing for a job at Rite Aid, you don't need to know very much.
So
and I think that that's what we need to...
You're saying the real, if I understand you, the real purpose is to dumb down the...
Yes, the real purpose
the rhetoric is to complain about it, but the real purpose is to totally dumb down the...
Exactly.
The population, get them ready to work at Walmart
the
or
goal
McDonald's.
is to synchronize the education system with the economy. We have an economy that is creating low-wage jobs requiring a 7th or 8th grade education. You can't have an educational system that's sending everybody to college.
Well, test-driven education, you create widgets, you know, standardized tests, standardized minds.
And you don't care if they graduate.
They can't think. There's no assessment of creativity or independent thinking. There's never been a test that measures the ability to think for oneself, let alone creativity, social capacity to think morally. All these issues.
And that's the reason that schools that serve upper middle class, affluent communities, they don't have a problem with the test scores, do they?
No, they just,
so they're able to focus on material that encourages the kids to think critically, so they'll go to the elite schools. They'll go to the elite schools.
That's interesting.
And hardly anybody else is going to go to college, which is the reason that tuition is being raised at CUNY. You think it's an accident? This is the neoliberal project in the rest of the world. Impose higher fees for college, for higher education, to keep most people out, so that only a narrow stratum of the population is going to go to college. So whenever we hear about these international test scores, I think we need to keep in mind that this is rhetoric that is used in this country to mask the reality of an increasingly stratified society that needs an increasingly stratified education system.
Wow. So round. I'm not sure how many more minutes we have left. I think we're certainly in the last 3 or 4. So as we bring this together, I really need to know actually how many more minutes we have left. So thank you. So we have a minute left, and so in this minute, is somebody, you got a story, you got a minute story. I think, you know, we reached a crescendo, right? And so we're going to
stay tuned.
We're stay tuned. We're going to tie up this conversation.
We'll give
we're
an
going to have another
irony.
one.
We'll give an irony back to you. One of the things that's happening in CUNY, reinforcing what's happening in CUNY, is a number of years ago they set up this honors college, and the honors college is to take the best and the brightest, and to bring them to CUNY, and to give them no tuition, free computers, special courses, etc., within the realm of the public university. And those are the students that are coming from those backgrounds who otherwise would be attracted to go to the private colleges because that's their route into exactly what you're talking about. So that's the way we keep some of our honesty, as it were, in serving the needs of the city. It's amazing.
Very interesting.
Well, now I think we actually have a minute. Now we probably have 50 seconds left, and 50 little seconds.
Okay, so again, we can be quick. I think the irony is that there are certain countries that, however they're seen, and some of it is the testing, I think there is some validity to it. So if we take like Finland and Singapore and places like that that rank high, one of the things happening there is that they have some of the strongest teachers' unions and some of the most flexibility in allowing for creative ways of teaching, and are not locked into the things that we're locking more and more into.
Finland, yes. Singapore, no.
Finland.
So let's.
Interesting. Why?
'Cause
Yeah.
We got to come back to this. I'm sorry, because you know time rushes on. So listen, we're going to come back to we're going to continue this discussion. But it'll be aired a little bit later, and you'll see it a little bit later. So, but it all goes on the website, and we'll link to everything that everybody mentioned. I know they do this on Democracy Now!, so we'll do.